Okay, so welcome everybody, and thank you very much for joining us. We're here at the Festival of Education 2025. My name is Daniel Emerson. I'm the Executive Director of Good Future Foundation, and I'm here with a wonderful group to talk through various aspects of human flourishing within the context of AI in education. I'll hand over to my co-host Laura for an introduction.
Yes, it's lovely to be here. Thank you so much, Daniel. So my name is Laura Knight, and I work with schools, universities, publishers, and edtech companies on helping folks to use technology well in education. I'm really interested in centering humanity in our conversations around AI and innovation. So really looking forward to this conversation, thinking about young people's inputs and key ideas.
Excellent stuff. Let's hear from our student council. Alec, if you could just give a brief introduction as to who you are and what you do and what your interest is in AI.
So I'm Alec. I've just finished my second year studying data science at the University of Bristol, and I'm a member of the Good Future Foundation Student Council. Uh, AI will massively impact my future career, and the entire industry of data science. I think it's really important that we think about it now, so that we can. Oh, it's left me. So that we can, yeah, future-proof things, I guess.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. I'm Emily. I just finished my first year, politics and international relations. I'm also a member of the student council. My interest in AI, I think, is more around how do we make the use of AI ethical, and safer, for students.
And I think before we begin with our questions for you today, it'd be good to know from you, Laura, what do you mean by human flourishing and why is that an important subject for us to be considering today?
So one of the things that is, I think, so important for us to notice is that there are tensions in this space around different people's agendas and what matters the most in the story of innovation. And so I think if we've learned anything from the social media era, we have certainly understood that profit over compassion leads to some fairly catastrophic outputs and results in ways that I think we should rightfully be alarmed and concerned at the very minimum by. I think it takes quite a lot of presence of mind and strategic thinking and care to put humans first and to put young people's interests first in this story rather than the interests of shareholders, for example, and profits. And while that might sound a little bit too bleeding hearted at this point, I do think it takes people to be quite noisy about it, and to center those key values and principles rather than get kind of wafted along by the momentum and the tide of change driven by appetites that have nothing to do with wanting the best for people.
I'm interested to know, certainly from our student council members here, how much consideration you might put on what goes on behind some of the tools and the technology that's being promoted to students, perhaps for productivity reasons or for reasons relating to social interaction and connection. How much do you think about um, the values behind these organizations and what it is they're building?
Probably not as much as I should. um, yeah, there's definitely an element of sample bias in all of the generative AI models that you encounter these days. Um, and we don't really know what their agenda is.
Right.
Um,
And do you think that young people make, I mean, this is a huge generalization. So maybe you and your circle of friends and the people in your courses at university, do you think you make conscious choices about which tools you use based on any particular values or goals? Or is it really like just grab the nearest thing?
Probably convenience
Yeah.
or anything else.
Yeah.
The one you hear about most. So most people use ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm. So that idea of hearing about it is really important, isn't
Yeah.
it? And perhaps that idea of something being popular combined with the fact that if we're really honest with ourselves, we're not very good at reading terms and conditions before we hit accept. That combination means that the decisions we make might feel quite passive, as you say.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Um, probably a bad thing.
This is no judgment. Like I'm saying, this is not something that's just like happening to young people at all. There are very responsible adults who make the same sorts of decisions. So there is no implied criticism here, I promise you, Alec. But what I do think is interesting is how it doesn't take very much for us to ask ourselves, actually, why am I doing this? Why did I choose that? Does it actually align with my own worldview? And just that moment of reflection is enough to make us think differently. That's
I think that sometimes we are willing to kind of overlook some of the details, the tools that we use just for the sake of convenience. It's kind of the easy way out. And we don't think about how the platforms that we use are made. And I'm not talking about just AI, I'm talking even about social media, how we use it, where our data goes, but also what are the impacts of these platforms. I mean, AI has a terrible environmental impact, and we don't think about it every time that we use it because we think, wow, this can make me a bit more productive. It can make things a bit easier for me.
right. And that question around environmental impact is also really difficult to measure. And there's quite a lot of conflicting information evidenced by we don't even know what, right? With different people's agendas in the mix. And it becomes quite political, doesn't it? And so it's also not only the case of finding things that align with our values, but also then being able to trust the information that we're consuming and to know whose agenda it matches and how true it is.
Up until very recently, and I don't know if this is still true because it can shift, but it's an example of how we might consider truth when we're interacting with a generative AI tool, for instance. But ChatGPT will tell you, or at least it would, that it uses between 1 to 5 liters of water for every prompt. 1 to 5 liters for every prompt
Right.
to call its data centers.
And we wonder, don't we? Because there's some displacement questions in the mix. Like, if we didn't prompt it, would we be using another technology that might also have some effect? Is it a zero sum game in that sense? Of if there's are alternatives or displacements happening? But also, I had some sixth form students ask me some really interesting questions. They were like, well, we're trying to use pure words in our prompts, and if we say please, does that mean the environmental impact is worse? And actually, how do we articulate value in that sense of if we're talking about water and is it recycled and where is it ethically sourced? And well, it's so complicated. So that number in and of itself, what does that even mean?
Right.
Where does that water come from? Who doesn't have it as a result? And so in isolation, it's quite a tricky thing to compute, wouldn't you say?
I think so. I'm interested to know if you have any experiences of not using a tool, either an AI tool or social media, as you mentioned, because of values implications.
That's a great question. I think I stopped using TikTok quite a long time ago. But I think that was not values, but more the impact it had on me, on my mental health, and I think on my attention in general. But that's actually something that I struggle with AI as well. I think it's made me more impatient as a person. So in some ways, I try to limit. I limit how much I use it, just because I know that the more I use it, the more I have this expectation that information should come to me so quickly. So I think that's for me.
Yeah, I've done similarly with TikTok. Lose hours of my day if I download it. I considered stopping to use Twitter due to X now, due to ethical reasons, but there's too many people on there that didn't move, so I wasn't able to. But that's a decision that I tried to make.
There's a community FOMO aspect to it, right? Because one can make one's own ethical choices, but if you know you're leaving behind entire networks in those spaces, that does feel like a real challenge. Yeah.
How does that make... Well, I'm interested to know, how does that make you feel, right? Particularly when you're locked into an environment like X that you can't get out of because it has an implication for who you interact with and how you interact with them. Does that have an impact on what you think about the organization? Or if you do use or leverage the organization in any way, do you think differently about how you're using it?
That's interesting, because I never think about the organization itself. I had that same problem as you have with Twitter. I have that with Instagram, where all of my friends talk to me on Instagram. and my dream is to be able to delete Instagram. But I always think like, wow, we as a group of people are unable to exit this platform. But in reality, it's not necessarily our fault. It could also be the corporation, but we don't put in at the forefront in this issue.
Actually, the corporation isn't in that story. It's the peer group who need a critical mass to actually make the decision to move, and that feels like a really big ask, even though it isn't, because you could replicate that entire experience on any number of other spaces. But the inertia of change is actually a bigger weight to carry than the values shift. And that for me feels really interesting. I'm so curious about what would make you all move.
If they deleted it,
Right.
honestly. If the platform didn't exist anymore, I think that would be the way out. No, honestly, I don't really know how I can get out of it. Yeah, interesting. Really frustrating.
On the human flourishing side, I'm also interested to know, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, but there's something about previous engagement or history with that platform that makes it also very difficult to leave, because you share your moments, aspects of your life, what you've seen, your experiences all go onto these platforms. Is that part of the decision making as to why you wouldn't believe it, for example, or does it feel too hard to give up what you've already contributed?
Really.
Not for me personally, because I don't really post on social media much. But I know lots of people that would be attached to their posts and would be attached to their follower account and stuff. Where moving to a new platform would make it quite hard to reestablish yourself.
There's a lot of status there, isn't there? And then also the saying goodbye to that history might feel quite a wrench, especially if that gives you social capital in some way, whether it's your follower account, whether it's this sort of beautiful portfolio of all of your stuff, which in some way represents you. In the generations past, that would have been your bookshelf or your CD collection, team. That people would have to be physically in your space to see. But these days, obviously, that is a much more public artifact, right?
Yeah.
And there's an intersection as well, of course, between social media platforms, WhatsApp in particular, and generative AI now, right? So
Yes.
just to bring that into the conversation, this had an impact on me, certainly, but I'm very keen to know from others thoughts around this. All of a sudden, an AI tool appeared within an existing platform that people use every single day from across multiple generations without any level of consent or guidance on how to use it. I'd love to know your thoughts on this as a strategy, why that happened, and whether or not it impacted how you use it.
I mean, I woke up one day and WhatsApp had an AI, and I was like, "Oh, hello, what are you doing here?"
Yeah.
I have never used it though. I didn't feel the need to use it, but I can imagine. I talked to my grandmother that we birthed, and she was like, "What is this? What is this thing that has appeared on my WhatsApp?" And I think she doesn't know how to use the tool, so she doesn't have that guidance that you were talking about. So in a way, I think it must be quite confusing for users, especially those who are not aware of the space that AI is now taking in our lives. And there is also some little information about how this AI was made and what is used to what data is used to make this AI. And so we've learned that Meta was in fact using our data
Right.
from all of our posts and conversations to then train the AI, which is like, well, that's great, but you didn't ask us, you and nobody knew about it. It was just a change in the terms of conditions, and to back out, it's actually incredibly hard. I tried to do it myself on Instagram to back out of that setting, and it's just they make it really hard for you to find it.
Right. And do you feel like, is there a surveillance aspect to that where you feel like your data, your stuff, your digital self in a way is being watched actively, or does it feel like it's just a presence that you're not engaging with?
I feel like I've kind of come to terms with the fact that I don't have a private life online, but all of the information that's out there, that maybe it was like younger me who posted it, and it's always going to be there. There's always going to be a trace of it, and there's nothing I can do about it. So maybe in a way I've just kind of given up on that. Okay, on just not having a presence online. I don't know.
Yeah, from when generative AI started coming on the scene, to speak, especially with generative images. I sometimes post digital art online, and I interact with a lot of other people that do that. And there was a lot of concern about people's art getting scraped for data and stuff. So it's been something that I've been thinking about for quite a while. And it's the only way that could change would be for policy to be done around it, which is hard when the online space is so international.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on this one, Laura?
Around policy. Gosh. So there are layers here, right? So if we start with the individual experience that you have and your own governance of yourself and your behaviors, that's the first line of defense. Then particularly if you're in a school or your family or another sort of more, I suppose, mitigated space, you may well have support or limits that are placed on you by that organization or your environment. Then there's that national sphere, and then there's your sort of beyond national sphere. So policy isn't a monolith, and I think we should remember that. One of the challenges I have around is that we tend to devolve responsibility to adultier adults. And the problem is that the adultier adults are not the lifeguard in the swimming pool of life. They're just the CCTV camera. And the CCTV camera doesn't care about you. But we sort of imagine, we have this fantasy that some big benevolent presence is hoping for the best for us in our world. And that's just a fantasy. It's not based on any actual truth. So I think we should absolutely stamp our feet and shout about better policy, but we shouldn't expect it to do the work of ensuring our flourishing. That's a soundbite.
Is it I'm interested then in the onward projection of that, because we're talking a lot about social media here, and the implications of policy, I think, are just as significant with Gen AI tools. Do you think it's possible, based on our engagement so far with this new technology, that this will also become something that is so embedded in our lives it would be very, very difficult to leave behind if we decided moving forward that that's what we wanted to do?
Yeah, I think it's already so hard, to leave it behind. It's part of our lives, our work lives, our personal lives sometimes. So it's just how do we give it up now?
Yeah.
If it does.
There's something about that embedding, isn't there? That's really interesting. I think if people talk about generative AI as a discrete tool and something that like a website you might visit or an app you might download and that you go and use it, people often talk about VAI as again, that's sort of an entity. But I think that misses a trick. And what we're talking about here is whether you're in a social media space, a work space, a Microsoft or Google environment, that there are AI capabilities embedded in so much of that are really opaque. And that is one of the challenges here, that stepping away from it and making a choice about particular approaches you might take is harder than you might imagine, rather than just saying, I'm not going to go on TikTok, which feels like a very contained space.
But it also feels quite bold.
Yes.
Right? To move away from it and to acknowledge how much time that's taking away from you, because that's also part of the flourishing piece, right? And to make that decision, I think that's a really bold
Yeah, absolutely.
thing to do.
And wouldn't it be great to be able to be bold, not by bowing out of it entirely, but by making specific choices about how you do engage with it and the data you're prepared to share and curating its experience?
It would be, but I think for me the best way is out of sight, out of mind. Because I can't really, like, if I have the app on my phone, I can't limit myself and what I use and what I don't use. So I think it's maybe a radical approach, but it seems to be the only thing that works, at least for me, to get away from it. And I think that would be for the same thing for other social media platforms.
I'm hearing great self-awareness from both of our young people
definitely.
here, which I really am celebrating in this moment with you.
I'm inspired.
Yeah, I agree with that, because these companies don't want you to be able to limit your use.
No.
So like I have the problem with Instagram and Instagram Reels. It is just like TikTok. Like it sucks you in and you can't stop, but there's no way of like limiting your access to Reels within the Instagram app. Like it's everything or nothing.
Right.
And if I delete Instagram, I can't talk to the friends that I don't like live in the same city as. So it's
Yeah. And that challenge to your self-regulation and your ability to actually balance your what your digital world is really important here. So these experiences are created and curated in a way that is designed to disrupt your equilibrium. And the AI pieces, the foundational algorithmic pieces, I'll be talking about a bit later today, those are not engineered for your well-being. And you get that, right? You know. So there's this kind of almost sordid quality to succumbing to it, right? I think that's so interesting that there's almost something like a confessional, like a guilt-induced, okay, I've numbed out in front of TikTok for an hour and a half or whatever it happens to be, and I've lost that part of my day. But it's like a drug-induced haze.
But also there's something in that, what does that tell us about how these tools are being developed and how little the organizations care about the implications of this overuse? And also when we think about the age required to access these platforms, I don't know how old you were when you started to use them, but 13 is of course the required legal age, but it's so very easy to access them before that. Can you tell us something about that?
I think I accessed it before that. I think I was probably 11 at the time. I think it's because it was a long time ago. They maybe didn't have the same restrictions.
Don't think it's improved very much, to be honest.
Yes, but it's true. I mean, they have access to these tools, and then I think at such a young age, parents don't necessarily have the capacity to kind of look over everything that their kids are seeing online, and we know that everything that is seen online that impacts kind of the development of a person. So no, it's a bit concerning. But then again, there's this element of FOMO. It's like, well, all of my friends are there. I can't be the only person who's not. So you go anyways.
Yeah, I didn't access social media till I was 13 because my parents were particularly vigilant about it. But yeah, most of my friends had it before then, and I definitely felt the FOMO.
How did you navigate that, Alec?
I was upset, and my parents held firm. I don't know.
That's a bit, yeah. I just wasn't cool for a long time.
Yeah. And do you feel now that was the right call? Like, do you understand it now that you're older?
Probably. I think there are definitely harmful aspects to social media. I think I could have had a perfectly fine experience when I was 12, when I was 11, but there are definitely reasons to be concerned and to limit it.
Absolutely.
So maybe just to wrap up, it would be great to have some thoughts maybe to share with, of course, we'll have schools that are watching this, but also with tech providers around what might they be able to do to reconsider perhaps the aspects of their business that restrict flourishing as a consequence of use. Is there anything that you'd want to
What would you ask for?
focus?
I mean, if they are willing to change anything, which I don't know if that would be the case, but I think it's kind of putting human well-being at the forefront of the platform. So thinking about what do users need rather than what they need. So I think specifically for social media, and this is a message for Instagram, make a separate app for your messages and for the main feed. And then those who want to step away from the main feed actually can and don't feel the need to stay on such platform. It's small things like that which I think come from interacting with your users and getting to understand exactly what they need that allows for just more about the human authority that we were talking about, people that actually agree with people.
Because the piece that brings you joy is the connection with your peers and being able to retain that sense of community and sharing and knowing that regardless of how far apart you are, that you can keep that close to you in a way, right? That feels important. And it's such a shame that you have to balance it with an experience that doesn't contribute to your well-being in the same way. We love the connection. We don't love the dopamine hunting.
Well, finally then, Laura, maybe for you, in terms of schools that are watching this, that are trying to navigate procurement of new technology, looking at AI, is there anything we can learn, particularly from this social media or social media and generic experience, that might be able to help guide their thinking?
So I'd start with purpose and values. Of course, I would. That should be an obvious thing given what I've said. But looking for alignment on the kinds of ethos and culture that you want in the school to align the tools that you choose to that process feels important to me. The second thing is around maximizing transparency and explainability. So wherever it's possible to make it really clear to even the youngest of users and your least tech confident staff what the processes are that are happening behind the scenes, and helping people understand where their data goes and what difference it makes when they use this or that approach. I think that's a really empowering thing. So helping people be better users, better consumers, and have better experiences so that they know the limitations and they understand the pitfalls. That's a digital literacy question, which is perhaps not what you'd imagine for procurement, but here we are.
Well, we're going to be speaking a lot more about that later on here at Festival of Education at Wellington College.
Absolutely.
Thank you so very much for a really engaging and honest conversation. It was wonderful speaking with you.
Thank you both. Thank you.